this thing on? Because it's getting ready to be on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Greg Pockerke. I'll be your host. Your guest today is Paul Bonaro of Oath, formerly Yahoo. They're a success story of ours. We helped attract the data center to Lockport a couple of years ago, and now Paul gets to tell us the story of why Buffalo is good for data centers, for advanced business services companies, and why Oath is still succeeding. So thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoy, and rate us on iTunes. So for those that don't know, what is Oath?
So Oath is it's the business that resulted from the combination of two businesses, former Yahoo and AOL. Verizon had purchased AOL several years ago, and last year in 2017 they closed on purchasing Yahoo. So similar businesses, they combined those two companies, and Oath is the house of brands that's the result of that.
And what's your role with the company?
So I'm the Vice President of Data Center Operations for the U.S. So we have data centers where all the computers live that operate all these websites and brands, and those locations are international and in the U.S., and I oversee the locations in the U.S., including Lockport, New York.
Right, which is what we're here to talk about.
Right, yeah.
The one in Western New York. So you started with then Yahoo right when they came to Western New York, right?
That's right, yeah. 2010 is when I started, and my first day I was the first person on the construction site that was a Yahoo employee full-time, and that was about halfway through construction. Yeah.
And so what's it been like to see the data center in Lockport grow and change as one of the first people there, and now still there today?
It's really amazing. It started out, the building itself was a bit of an experiment. So the fact that the operations have been successful are a testament to the team we have there. But also the team that operates the building is not the largest team in Lockport. So the network operations center and global service desk and customer care groups have all been established and grown there as well, and they've spawned other teams around them. So that's been my favorite part of what's happened there. Is not only is the core group that needs to be there to operate the data center been very successful, but the teams around them have been extremely successful and have grown quite a bit as well.
Right. So, how big is the team at the Lockport facility? Like, how many people do you employ?
So we started out in 2010. There was about 75 people at the time, and now there's over 200.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
So how have you managed attracting and hiring talent, and specifically, tech talent?
Yeah, like the original team was, super excited about the project. We were able to attract, top talent from the professional market, also a lot of new hires straight out of local colleges, and it's continued to become, as we've grown those teams around the original functions, we've continued to build relationships with different pipelines for talent, and Western New York, there's for our team anyway, retention is very good, not a lot of turnover, so we're able to kind of grow the people on our team into more senior roles, and we've been able to backfill them with people out of these different pipelines, and that's been very successful. It's taken a lot of work to establish those pipelines. It's not there's no silver bullet there,
right?
But there are partners in the region, the universities and colleges and community colleges that definitely want to partner with the businesses, and we try and be as proactive as we can to let them know what we're looking for, and the results have been very good, but it has taken a lot of work to do that.
Yeah. So are you hiring? Is it engineers, or what types of job titles are you most often hiring for?
Yeah. So there are the range of functions in Lockport will go from, you'll be hiring computer science majors out of college, or that work in related fields professionally. There's a lot of people with background with the computer hardware, IT hardware and networking skills. We'll also hire electricians and mechanics to operate the buildings. And there are other groups that are really just looking for people with real world experience in operations in IT, where a lot of our groups are kind of reactive in nature to what's going on with our network and having to triage and respond to that. So they'll pull from a wide variety of backgrounds, and it's a great place to work, I think, from the perspective that once people start, and it's a big international company, but we've got a kind of an office in Lockport with a culture, and so people start there, and they really get an opportunity to show what they can do. And it's once you're in a company like that, you've proven to be successful, and you're working at a high level, you can advance pretty quickly in the ranks, and through different groups or different opportunities within a group. And then there's mobility, geographically too. So we've had people start in Lockport, move into other offices. We've had other people that were in other offices move to Lockport for more senior positions or manager positions and things like that. So that mobility, I think, is a huge attraction too. When people start in Lockport, within 4 or 5 years, you could have done 2 or 3 different things, and then have opportunities all throughout the company if you want to pursue that. Which is, right. I think that's one of the things that's kind of unique in the area from that IT perspective, is that you can kind of grow up and out, and it's unlimited as to what you can do.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's a balance of like those hard skills learned in school and the soft skills of putting out fires or being able to communicate, and things like that help people move up as well, right? That's right.
We're looking for some very basic, fundamental skills in some of the IT jobs, and if people can be proficient in that and come in and hit the ground running, and then they prove to adapt well to that environment and move fast and have success there. Really, sky's the limit.
So you guys, do you find a lot or a strong pipeline from like UB and RIT and some colleges like that, Alfred?
Yeah, so we have a lot of graduates from UB. We had a lot of graduates from RIT originally. The original team was pretty heavy with RIT graduates, and a lot of them are still there.
Yeah,
doing really, really well. We're in Niagara County, so Niagara University, Niagara Community College. We have relationships with them. We just had an event on our campus for our employees to pursue additional education at some of these institutions. So we invited some of the schools I mentioned, came on site. Empire State came on site and presented to folks on our team what they could do to pursue advanced degrees or different skills with coursework and things like that. So continuing education is obviously a big deal in IT. Things change very fast. Also, people who have excelled at the function of their job but then are offered leadership opportunities might want to pursue different skills that they can obtain through the school. So we've invited them in, and it's like I said, we've tried to put out a broad net and let as many people know as possible what we're looking for, kind of match it up with what they can offer, and leverage the whole network.
Right. So I think you mentioned it very briefly earlier. When Yahoo was looking to place this new data center, one of the things that they looked at for Western New York was our climate.
Yeah.
And you mentioned kind of like almost an experiment, or at least on this scale, of what the actual facility and the buildings are like. Can you tell people that might not know a little bit about that?
Yeah. So first of all, a data center, for those who wouldn't know, is just it's a in our case, it's a large buildings that are filled with computers, high-end servers and networking equipment to connect them to the internet, and that's what does all the processing behind anything you do on the internet, really. And in our case, we're large enough where we actually need to own and operate our own buildings to do it effectively, cost-effectively, and things like that. So when you have that many computers in a concentrated area, the two things that they need most are continuous power. We don't want the power to ever go out, so that we can offer our services constantly. If you're going to check your mail, we don't want it to not be there.
Or set my fantasy line up.
Fantasy is a big deal right now. Absolutely. Yep. We avoid impacting fantasy at all costs. So power is a big deal, and also those computers, essentially are just giant electric heaters too. So we've got to cool those servers. So power and cooling are a big deal. One of the things that makes our building unique and was one of the first of its kind in scale is we've got tens of thousands of computers in Lockport, but we don't use any mechanical cooling. We don't use any air conditioning to cool that space. And this was a new concept in 2009, 2010, where Yahoo had its own engineers working with some partners had done a mock-up in a warehouse where they used dry ice and a couple of computers and fans and things like that to test their theories. And then the next thing they did was build a $100 million building in Lockport and hand us the keys and say make it work. So we don't have the air conditioning to turn on when it gets really hot to cool these computers, but we have fans to bring air in, and we have evaporative cooling, which is essentially like spraying mist on yourself on a hot day. It kind of cools the air around you. So those are the two things we leverage to cool the space. The computers are tolerant of high temperatures. Usually, they don't think much of 95 or 100 degrees. If it gets that extreme, we don't get that extreme. And if you want to deploy this concept, you need a climate to do it in, and it wouldn't work very well in South Carolina or Georgia or somewhere, climate like that. So they were really looking for a geography where they could deploy this technology, and Western New York has a climate that's very temperate, very suitable to this approach. And I mentioned power earlier. Power is a big deal, and the team at Yahoo worked with the state and New York Power Authority, and got access to hydropower, which is a big deal. When you have that much power, we're talking tens of megawatts of power going into a building. The company social goals really steered us towards renewable energy, and our two biggest data centers in the U.S. are in Quincy, Washington, and Lockport, New York, and both of those are major hydro markets. So we've been very fortunate in that respect too. So really unique concept to make a data center without mechanical cooling work. But 8 years in, we've got all kinds of data to show that it's been a huge success. We've expanded. We're completing our 5th expansion at the location in Lockport. We're on to our 6th. We've also deployed the technology in Quincy, Washington. Quincy is a lot hotter, but it's very dry. It's kind of high desert climate, so that evaporative cooling works very well there. It'll drop the temperature a lot more than it would in our climate. We're only using it here for maybe 100 or 400 hours a year. So that's the only, we only use it when we get above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and so we kick that in, and it works very well. And we've got data to prove that doesn't have a detrimental effect on the IT hardware, which is the big concern, that we'd be burning up processors and memory and things like that. That's not the case at all, and that's been a major win for us.
Yeah, and two things. One, my fantasy team doesn't need a power outage to implode. Like, it's doing that on its own. And two, they studied like 100 years of weather data prior to even implementing it to make sure that it was going to work. And now you have years of it actually working in practice, right?
That's right. Yeah, you can't have a bad day. So they look back pretty far at the weather history and all the locations where we installed this kind of data center, and it's proven to be. We've had some extreme days on both ends of it. Everybody thinks about cooling as the major concern. I mentioned 100 to 400 hours a year where we actually have to do some cooling. There's thousands of hours a year where we actually have to heat the building, right? We don't want to heat that mechanically either, so we capture all the heat off the back of the servers, and on a normal hot summer day, we're letting that just rise out of the top of the building because of its unique shape. It got its inspiration from a chicken coop. We call it the computing coop. But on a winter day where it's 5 below, we want all that heat, so we can retain that heat, circulate that back down, and it's 65 or 70 degrees in the computer room all winter as a result of that. So there's definitely some challenges with it.
So whether it's using the ambient air, temperate climate to cool the facility, or thinking about hydropower, which is affordable, green power. How do those things align with a large company's sustainability goals and your footprint? Companies are obviously conscious of those things, and how does that fit into the company culture?
It's definitely something that I think all large corporations have to pay attention to, and Yahoo in particular was concerned with it, and site selection, where they chose to build, and invest, and now as part of Oath, and Oath is part of Verizon, and so Verizon's very interested in what we're doing here. I was very happy to find that we were not only deploying data centers that leveraged renewable energy, but because we don't do this mechanical cooling, we're extremely energy efficient. So we don't use huge amounts of energy that go into the cooling and heating of a data center, which would be typical for a data center of this scale. So not only we have that renewable footprint, but we've reduced the total amount of energy we consume. Both huge wins, and Verizon has a sustainability team that was very interested in learning more about that. Most large corporations have to, or choose to report in a carbon disclosure, materials every year, and that report comes out, and they score most large corporations on how they're doing in these areas, and that can bring a lot of negative attention to a brand or to a company, and for us it's been a win. It's been a positive story to be able to tell in the community, and at large within the data center, the groups that we participate with.
One of the other things that we like to put in our marketing materials or collateral is Buffalo's aversion to risk of natural disasters, and when you're dealing with something like a data center where you have so much money invested in the equipment, in the buildings, is that something that's important to you guys, or an added benefit, even if on the margins?
Yeah, no, that's a major component of selecting a site. Risks from all different kinds of weather, natural disasters, things like that Western New York checks a lot of boxes there in avoidance of. The big one we have to contend with here is snow, and we can deal with snow. But
snow melts.
Yeah, snow melts, and we're creating a lot of heat anyway with our buildings, so snow doesn't necessarily accumulate around them, and we clear it out and keep stay functional. And the people that work here and live here are used to dealing with that. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, those are much bigger risks, from disrupting data centers. And there's a lot of case studies out there where that's a risk you take with certain geographies that we don't have to contend with here in Western New York, and we're very happy to not have to do that. Yeah.
All right. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is just the power of the data center up in Lockport. If you could put it in context for people and myself of any numbers that you can share.
Yeah. So the data center in Lockport, depending on where we are in a cycle, might be using somewhere between 15 and 20 megawatts of power, and that's enough power for a small, pretty decent sized town. So like I said, a lot of concentration of the hardware, and when you walk through our building, there's tens and dozens of these, what we call pods, and each pod uses about 200 kilowatts of power, and 200 kilowatts of power is good for maybe 150 or 200 homes. We have dozens of those over and over again in our building, so that's something, like I said, we don't take lightly, and that's why the energy efficiency aspect is a huge focal point for us. Not only do we have a design that lends itself to that, but you have to operate it too. We've got a fantastic team up there that really keeps their eye on things and makes sure we're always running in that optimum curve and being responsible with the power we do use.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming in. I just have a quick couple Blizzard round questions for you before we finish up.
Great.
If you were a flavor of ice cream, what would you be?
Oh, it would be Paula's Red Velvet Donut Ice Cream from Lake Effect. It is my favorite. Sure. I'd be that all day.
Probably the best answer ever. A book or TV show that you'd recommend?
I just read Testimony, the Robbie Robertson story. It was in the band. That was really enjoyable. I learned a lot about the band. Yeah.
Text or phone call?
Text. Yeah.
Bills or Sabres?
Sabres.
Bills played very poorly yesterday.
Sabres are giving us hope.
Yeah. Hiking or skiing?
Oh, I used to be a skier, but it's more hiking now. Yeah.
And last question: chicken wings, drumstick or flat?
The variety is part of the benefit there. I'd say flat if I had to choose one. Yeah.
Flat, but you don't care much.
No, I like the variety. Yeah, if you don't have the variety is part of the deal. But
Yeah.
you can't like you can one-hand a drumstick. You can't one-hand a flat. You kind of got to get in there. So
Right.
Flat. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Bell Ringer is a podcast by Invest Buffalo Niagara, the region's privately funded, nonprofit marketing and economic development organization. Please rate this podcast, follow our social media channels, and read our blog at buffaloniagara.org for the best of Buffalo Niagara. Come grow your business with us.